So good afternoon all, my name's Blair Smith and I'll be presenting Brunswick Lean-To. When friendships are formed via an architectural commission, those involved see the building through a different lens to others. This physical thing becomes more than the grain in the cladding or a shadow that moves across the floor. It's imbued with the spirit of your collective aspirations. Brunswick Lean-To is a 51 square metre addition to a heritage-protected cottage that abandons the real estate-driven notion of under-capitalising to create an appropriately sized home for a family of three. On my very first phone call with the clients, they mentioned looking forward to the design process with equal measure to moving into the finished building. This attitude indicated to me a fulfilling process ahead. So we agreed to meet at their family home. The original double-fronted cottage was built circa 1900 and presents as the centrepiece of a set of three houses with similar period detailing. Because there was a cohesive quality to the Victorian buildings within the street, it was important that the new addition would defer to the scale of the heritage frontage, and accordingly the new building sits below the cottage eave line or the gutter line. This is the original living room before construction, which was left largely untouched, albeit some new furniture and a heating panel. The interior of the old lean-to had some charm, mainly because of the client decor, but was almost untenable in winter because it was so poorly insulated. In fact, it was so cold. At this meeting, the three of us sat inside with our puffer jackets on, and understandably, thermal performance became a key part of the brief. This is the old lean-to structure before it was removed. And the existing plan. It's pretty easy to see here the inefficiency of the old lean-to in red and the clarity and functionality of the retained cottage. Reconfiguring the cottage or extending into the garden was deemed to be at odds with a low-impact strategy. So it became a matter of inserting a new structure in between the elements on site that was still useful. The addition takes formal and programmatic cues from the lean-to it supersedes. The design process set out to distill the poetic utility typically inherent to these subsidiary structures. In the same instance, an important objective was to purge out the shortcomings of its predecessor: lack of aspect, an awkward layout, and of course, poor thermal performance. Like the old lean-to, the new addition contains all of the domestic utilities. The brief called for an additional toilet and a walk-in pantry, which doubles as a mudroom and a thoroughfare. This photo was taken during the slab pour. It's quite telling in terms of scale when you make note of the 5 concreters on the floor plate. A key objective was to create a space that would provide a sense of sanctuary and refuge from the intensity and grit of Brunswick. During our meetings, the clients developed the phrase strong and elegant, and this became a sort of condensed brief or even a mantra, a term that we checked in with regularly and something that even assisted decision making. Materials were selected to imbue the interior with a palpable, slow quality. The screens are an architectural device related to mood and retreat as much as pragmatism. A paint applied with a palette knife and a ribbed ceiling became a way of providing texture and richness in a cost-effective way. The northern facade is split into 11 modules. The 3 sliding screens have integrated fly mesh and can be locked across a corresponding doorway, allowing the occupants to leave the house or sleep while it's secure and passively cooled and free of insects. In turn, each screen has a dedicated portion of wall on which it can be parked. So there's one there, and then 2 near the bathroom there. Each screen has a dedicated portion of wall on which it can be parked, so all glazing can become unobstructed. The carefully sized eave is detailed in a way that when viewed from the raised garden bed, it's perceived as being quite thin, even though it's conventionally put together. The planted threshold was devised to seemingly graft the new building into its setting, suggesting the addition had somehow cross-pollinated with the established garden upon its arrival. Because our scope was so finite and restricted to the new addition, this was a way of stitching the new building into the site without working beyond that building envelope. There are no ceiling lights, giving the interior a primal quality, as if to ensconce inhabitants within a dimly lit den of some kind. Wet areas were positioned to allow the bathroom to connect with the garden in a legitimate way. So when completely open, the bathroom melds with the spaces adjacent, heightening a sense of permeability within the layout. Within the design process, we set out to investigate the notion of blurred space and blurred materials. One's forced to ask, what is wall, static, vis-a-vis screen, dynamic? Furthermore, what is brick and what is mortar? So the idea with the brick was to blur the surface with a flush mortar in a similar colour to the brick. The clients genuinely engaged with the design and procurement process, undertaking some of the construction work themselves. This included painting, staining and landscaping. So they landscaped the planter, stained all of the timber battens and did all of the internal painting. In terms of sustainable design, it was about the fundamentals. Pre-owned appliances and solar panels were reinstated, factory seconds were scrimmaged, even the island bench was purchased on eBay. There's no air conditioning. Electricity usage has been net positive over the course of the year, meaning they typically receive a small credit from their energy provider each month. Clear story windows, top right above the door there. At the high end of the ceilings purge out hot air in summer. There's also a high window in the powder room behind this shot. Here's the pre-owned cooker and a factory second range hood with a custom surround. And while the well-trod path of building bloated, cheaply constructed extensions to our heritage building stock continues to be prevalent, our clients have commissioned a building that meets their needs without overextending themselves or using unnecessary resources. Brunswick Lean-To forms part of the practice's ongoing investigation into ways that regenerative projects can be delivered sensitively and modestly by building only what is required with integrity. Thanks.